What happens when entitlement meets brilliance at 30,000 feet? A woman, comfortable in her hoodie, settles into her first-class seat, thinking only of the critical, life-saving work ahead of her. But her journey is interrupted. A lavishly dressed passenger, dripping in diamonds, points a finger and demands she move. "You don't belong here. Go to the back." The confrontation escalates. Flight attendants are called, and the entire cabin watches. But what the entitled passenger doesn't know is that she isn't just insulting another traveler. She's insulting the one person who holds her entire future in her hands. Stay tuned for a story of shocking prejudice and karma so perfect you won't believe it's real. The alarm was an insult. 3 AM. Dr. Imani Hayes didn't just wake up. She was pulled from the depths, her mind already racing, her fingers flexing as if they already held a scalpel. The darkness of her Los Angeles condo was absolute, but her brain was already lit, flooded with diagrams of the human heart. Specifically, the aortic valve. Even more specifically, the failing aortic valve of a man 6,000 miles away. Imani was 38, and she carried a weight that few could comprehend. She was a double board-certified cardiovascular surgeon, a pioneer in minimally invasive robotic surgery, and the lead fellow on a technique, the Hayes-Tully modification, that was saving patients previously deemed inoperable. Today, she was flying to Zurich, not for a conference, not for vacation. She was flying to perform. Her patient was Gerald Harrison, a billionaire philanthropist whose heart was a ticking clock. The surgical team in Switzerland was excellent, but they had requested her. Her. The pioneer. She splashed cold water on her face, staring at the woman in the mirror. Tired eyes. A small, faded scar on her chin from a childhood fall. Her hair was pulled back into a tight, practical bun. She dressed for comfort, for an 11-hour flight that was essentially a sterile tube for her to do her final prep. She pulled on a pair of black joggers, a soft, worn-out university hoodie, and a pair of comfortable sneakers. She looked, she mused, like a graduate student, not a world-renowned surgeon. It was a camouflage she had long grown accustomed to. Her Uber ride to LAX was a blur of darkness and brake lights. She didn't listen to music. She reviewed the patient's file on her encrypted tablet. Gerald Harrison, 72. Complicated comorbidities. The procedure would be a 14-hour marathon. The flight was her last chance to be still, to center herself. The Tom Bradley International Terminal was already stirring. The check-in line for Swiss Air was mercifully short. Imani walked to the first-class lane. The agent, a polite man with a name tag reading Kyle, smiled. "Good morning. Passport, please." Imani handed it over. Kyle typed. His eyes flickered from her passport photo to her hoodie, then to the screen. A tiny, almost imperceptible hesitation. "And where are you heading today, ma'am?" "Zurich," Imani said, her voice warm but tired. "Right. And your confirmation." Imani slid her phone across the counter, the first-class e-ticket glowing. Kyle's professional mask snapped back into place. "Of course, Dr. Hayes. My apologies. Here is your lounge invitation. You'll be in 1A, a window seat. We'll be boarding from gate 155 in approximately 90 minutes. Enjoy the lounge." Imani gave him a small, knowing smile. "Thank you, Kyle. Have a good morning." She had seen that flicker 1,000 times, the brief moment of cognitive dissonance when the package, a black woman in a hoodie, didn't match the label. First class. Dr. Hayes. She didn't let it bother her. It was just static. White noise in a world that was still learning to tune itself. Her real focus was on Gerald Harrison. She walked toward security, her mind already in Zurich, her hands already steady. She had a life to save. Everything else was just a distraction. The first-class lounge was an oasis of beige tranquility, soft lighting, whisper-quiet carpet, and the gentle clinking of porcelain. Imani found a secluded corner, ordered a bottle of sparkling water and a black coffee, and opened her tablet. She had 70 minutes. 70 minutes to review the final 3D rendered scans of Harrison's heart. The calm was broken by a voice that sliced through the quiet like a buzzsaw. "Arthur, this is unacceptable. Is this Veuve? They're serving Veuve. It tastes like dishwater. At these prices. Go and find someone and demand they open the dom." Imani glanced up. A woman in her late 50s, impeccably dressed, was waving a champagne flute at a harried-looking lounge attendant. She was wearing a cream-coloured St. John knit suit, a cascade of pearls, and a diamond bracelet that caught the light. Her platinum blonde hair was sculpted into a perfect, immobile helmet. Her husband, Arthur Dupont, a man who looked permanently apologetic, shrank in his seat. "Caroline, please. It's 5 in the morning. It's fine." "It is not fine, Arthur," she snapped. "Standards are standards. If we let them slip—" She gestured vaguely at the room. "Well, you see what happens." Her eyes swept the lounge and landed with laser focus on Imani. Imani was in her hoodie, her sneakers propped on her carry-on, her attention buried in a complex arterial graph. Caroline stared. It was not a glance. It was a full, head-to-toe assessment, and the verdict was clear in the purse of her lips. Not good enough. Caroline turned to the attendant. "You, young man, this lounge is supposed to be exclusive. What is the policy on guests? Are passengers allowed to bring just anyone in here?" The attendant, a young man named Ben, looked utterly confused. "Ma'am, everyone here is a first or business—" "Never mind," Caroline cut him off, her voice dripping with disdain. She gave Imani one last, withering look, as if her very presence was lowering the property value. Imani met her gaze. She held it for a solid 3 seconds. No anger, no fear, just observation, like a scientist studying a specimen. Then she deliberately turned back to her tablet, dismissing Caroline as completely as one would swat a fly. The psht sound of a new, more expensive champagne bottle being opened a moment later told Imani that Caroline had gotten her way. But the tension was palpable. Imani could feel the woman's eyes on her back for the next hour. "Focus, Imani," she told herself. "Aorta, valve, sutures, not the noise." Soon the boarding call for Swissair Le Chauffeur 1 to Zurich echoed softly. "We are now pleased to invite our first-class passengers and families travelling with small children to board." Caroline was on her feet in an instant, grabbing Arthur. "Come on, Arthur. We have to get on first. I will not have my carry-on put in the back." She and her husband bustled to the front, pushing past an elderly couple to be the first through the door. Imani waited. She was always the last to board. She preferred to let the chaos settle. She finished her water, packed her tablet carefully, and slung her backpack over one shoulder. As she walked to the gate, she took a deep breath, steeling herself for the long flight. She was in 1A, the quietest seat. She would sleep for the first 2 hours, review files for 4, and then sleep again. It was a plan. It was a plan that was about to be completely derailed. The jet bridge was quiet. Imani stepped onto the aircraft, a massive Boeing 777, and was greeted by a flight attendant. "Good morning, ma'am. Welcome aboard." "Good morning," Imani smiled. "Just to the left?" "Yes, first suite on your left, 1A." Imani turned into the first-class cabin. It was spacious and private, with only 8 suites in a 1-2-1 configuration. She found 1A, a window seat with its own privacy shell, ample storage, and a plush leather chair. She slipped her backpack under the ottoman, sat down, and breathed a sigh of relief. This would be her home, her office, and her monastery for the next 11 hours. She was just pulling out her noise-cancelling headphones when the shadow fell over her. "Excuse me." Imani looked up. It was Caroline Dupont. She was standing in the narrow aisle, her arms crossed, her face a mask of cold fury. Her husband, Arthur, hovered nervously behind her. "Yes?" Imani asked, her voice neutral. "You're in the wrong seat," Caroline stated. It wasn't a question, it was a declaration. "I don't think so," Imani said calmly. "This is 1A. And I'm telling you, you're in the wrong cabin," Caroline hissed, her voice low but sharp. "Economy is back, way back. I don't know how you got up here, but you need to leave. Now." Imani blinked. She had dealt with the flicker from the check-in agent. She had dealt with the stare in the lounge. This was a different level of aggression. This was a direct, public challenge. "Ma'am, I assure you, I'm in the correct seat," Imani said, her professionalism her only armor. "Don't ma'am me," Caroline snapped. The other first-class passengers were beginning to notice. A man in 1B, already sipping a pre-departure orange juice, looked over his newspaper. "Look," Caroline said, leaning in, her expensive perfume washing over Imani in a nauseating wave. "I don't know if you're a companion for one of the other passengers, or perhaps you won some sort of contest. But these seats are for paying customers. My husband and I are in 1C and 1D. She pointed to the two middle seats. "I want the window. You are going to move and take my middle seat, and you're going to be grateful for it. Or you can just go back to where you belong." "Caroline," Arthur whispered, tugging her sleeve. "Just leave it. Let's sit down." "I will not," Caroline said, her voice rising. "I paid thousands of dollars for this flight, and I will not have my experience ruined by someone who clearly doesn't belong." This was the moment, the pivot point. Imani could feel the familiar heat rising in her chest, the frustration, the exhaustion. She was tired of fighting this battle. She wasn't just a passenger, she was a doctor on her way to save a life. She didn't have the time for this. "Ma'am," Imani said, her voice dropping, becoming as sharp and precise as a scalpel. "I am not moving. I am in my assigned seat. You are in the aisle, blocking boarding. Please go to your assigned seat." Caroline's face turned a shade of mottled red. "How dare you! You insolent! I'll have you removed from this flight. Flight attendant, this woman is harassing me." A young, nervous-looking flight attendant, his name tag reading David, rushed over. "Ma'am? Mrs. DuPont, is there a problem?" "Yes, there's a problem." Caroline pointed a perfectly manicured finger at Imani. "This woman is in the wrong seat. She snuck into first class and she's refusing to move. I want her removed." David looked from Caroline's furious face to Imani's preternaturally calm one. He was trapped. "Ma'am," he said to Imani, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm so sorry, but would you mind just showing me your boarding pass, just to clear up the confusion?" Imani looked at him. He was young. He was scared. He was trying to de-escalate, but he had, in his fear, asked the wrong person. He had asked her, the person already seated, to prove her belonging, rather than telling the aggressor to stand down. "To clear up her confusion, you mean?" Imani corrected him gently. "Please, ma'am," David pleaded. The man in 1B, Mark Jennings, a tech CEO, folded his paper. "This is ridiculous. The woman is seated. Ask her to show her pass," he said, nodding at Caroline. "I will not," Caroline shrieked. "I am a Platinum Medallion member. I fly this route monthly. I know everyone. I don't know her." The cabin was now silent. The boarding process had stopped. Everyone was watching. Imani sighed. It was theatre, and the only way to end the show was to deliver the final line. With a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 similar moments, Imani unlocked her phone. She didn't hurry. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace that drew every eye. She opened the airline app, she clicked on the digital ticket, and she held it up. The screen glowed. "Passenger. Hayes Imani, doctor. Flight Lexo 41, Zurich, ZAIH. Seat, 1 class. First. She didn't just show it to David, the flustered flight attendant. She angled the screen, slowly, with surgical precision, directly toward Caroline DuPont's face. The blood drained from Caroline's cheeks. She stared at the screen, her eyes narrowing, searching for a flaw, a trick. The DR prefix seemed to mock her. It's a fake, she sputtered. But the conviction was gone. She used points. It's an upgrade. It's affirmative action. They're just giving these seats away now. Before David could even respond, a new voice, crisp and steel-edged, cut through the cabin. That is quite enough, Mrs. DuPont. Sarah, the lead flight attendant, the purser, had arrived. She was older, with a no-nonsense air and an immaculate uniform. She held the flight manifest on a tablet. Dr. Hayes, Sarah said, addressing Imani first with a nod of respect. My apologies for this disruption. Please make yourself comfortable. Then she turned to Caroline. The temperature in the aisle seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mrs. DuPont, you and your husband are in 1C and 1D. Dr. Hayes is in 1A. She is a full-fare, confirmed, first-class passenger. She is exactly where she is supposed to be. You are not. But she, Caroline stammered, pointing. There is no but, Sarah said, her voice final. You have harassed another passenger. You have disrupted the boarding process. You have made accusations that are, frankly, offensive. You will take your seat now, or I will have you and your husband removed from this aircraft. The captain is already aware of the disturbance. Do I make myself clear? Caroline looked around. The man in 1B was watching her with open contempt. The other passengers were whispering. Even her husband, Arthur, was looking at the floor, his face burning with second-hand shame. She had lost. Humiliated, she grabbed her purse and, without another word, shoved past Arthur and threw herself into her middle seat, 1C. She jammed her own headphones on, her entire body rigid with fury. Sarah gave Imani one more apologetic look. Again, Doctor, my apologies. Can I get you some champagne? Or perhaps just some water? Water would be lovely. Thank you, Sarah, Imani said, her voice steady. As Sarah and David moved away to resume their duties, the cabin door was sealed. The plane began its slow pushback. Imani leaned her head against the cool window. She closed her eyes. She should have felt victorious. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she just felt tired. So incredibly tired. The battle was over, but the war was a daily one. She pulled out her tablet. She had lost 20 minutes of prep time. She took a sip of her water. Focus, Imani. Aorta. Valve. Sutures. From the seat beside her, Mark Jennings in 1B leaned over slightly. That was impressive, the way you handled that. I'm Mark, by the way. Imani gave him a small, grateful smile. Imani. And thank you. Some days are just days. Well, he said, I hope the rest of your flight is much, much quieter. Imani smiled. Me too. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The first few hours of the flight were a blessing. The engines hummed, the lights were dimmed, and Imani, protected by her privacy shell and her noise-cancelling headphones, achieved the impossible. She slept. A deep, 2-hour REM cycle that reset her mind. When she woke, the cabin was dark, the service long over. She turned on her small reading light and went to work. For the next 4 hours, she was not on a plane. She was in an operating theatre. She pored over 3D models, medical charts, and contingency plans. She mentally rehearsed every cut, every suture. Across the aisle, Caroline DuPont was making life miserable for the crew. She had complained that her filet was tougher than shoe leather. She sent back a glass of wine, claiming it was corked. She snapped her fingers at David, the junior flight attendant, who looked increasingly stressed. Sarah, the purser, handled her with icy professionalism. But the tension was thick. The man in 1B, Mark Jennings, had been working on his own laptop. About 6 hours into the flight, he packed it up and turned to Imani. "Pardon me, Doctor," he said, his voice low. "I don't mean to intrude on your work, but I couldn't help but notice the name on your ticket." Imani looked up, pulling off her headphones. "Yes?" "Dr. Imani Hayes. Are you by chance the Dr. Hayes, the one who pioneered the Hayes-Tully aortic valve modification?" Imani was taken aback. "I am. It's not usually recognized outside of medical circles." Mark smiled, a genuine, appreciative smile. "I'm Mark Jennings. My company, Jennings Medical Tech, builds the robotic systems and imaging software that surgeons like you use. We've been following your work for years. It's groundbreaking. Truly, it's an honor to meet you." They began to talk. It was a quiet, high-level conversation about the future of robotic surgery, haptic feedback, and AI-assisted diagnostics. It was a conversation Imani rarely had with laypeople. Mark was sharp, insightful, and, most of all, respectful. "The work you're doing," Mark said, "it's not just medicine, it's artistry." "It's plumbing," Imani countered with a small smile. "Just very, very delicate plumbing." From her seat in 1C, Caroline DuPont was watching. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw the body language. She saw the deference and respect Mark Jennings, she had finally placed his face from a Forbes cover, was showing the woman in the hoodie. This only stoked her silent rage. The world was upside down. The wrong people were being celebrated. Just as Mark was asking Imani about her fellowship at Johns Hopkins, the cabin was pierced by a chime and a sudden, panicked announcement over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the purser. We have a medical situation in the economy cabin. If there is a doctor or a medical professional on board, please press your flight attendant call button immediately." Imani's head snapped up. Her conversation with Mark vanished. Her plumbing mindset took over. Before the announcement had even finished, her headphones were off, her seatbelt was unbuckled, and she was standing in the aisle. Sarah, the purser, was already rushing up from the galley. She saw Imani. "Doctor." "I'm a cardiovascular surgeon," Imani said, her voice now completely different. It was no longer the voice of a tired traveler. It was the voice of command. "What's the situation?" A male passenger, mid-60s, collapsed in the aisle. "He's unconscious. Get the medical kit, and the AED, now," Imani ordered, "and get me a line to your ground-based medical support. I want to talk to the pilot about diverting. Where's the closest viable airport?" Sarah, galvanized by Imani's authority, nodded sharply. "Right away, follow me." Imani sprinted out of the first-class cabin, through the galley, and past the curtains into economy. As she ran down the aisle, she was oblivious to the stairs. She was oblivious to the rocking of the plane. She was focused on one thing: the man lying prone on the floor, his face a pale, waxy grey. The curtain dividing first class from the galley was a flimsy, symbolic barrier. Imani pushed through it, and in that single step, she left one world and entered another. She had left the dark, cocoon-like quiet of the first-class cabin, a place of mood-lit blues, hushed whispers, and the scent of expensive coffee. She stepped into chaos. The economy cabin was a stark, fluorescent white tunnel of noise. Dozens of passengers were on their feet, their bodies craning, a sea of horrified, curious faces. Phones were out, held aloft, their small red recording lights blinking. The air was thick with the smell of panic, a coppery, adrenalized scent, and the sound was a wall of hushed, "Oh my gods," a woman's high-pitched sobbing, and the frantic, ineffective calls of a young flight attendant. "Please, sir, can you hear me? Please, everyone, sit down." Imani's eyes didn't see the crowd. Her surgeon's brain filtered all irrelevant data. Her gaze locked, with tunnel-like precision, on the epicenter of the panic. A body. A man, lying prone in the narrow aisle, his position awkward, his face a pale, waxy, cyanotic grey. "Out of the way!" Imani's voice was not a request. It was a physical force. It was not the tired, warm voice of Dr. Hayes, the passenger. It was the voice of Dr. Hayes, the chief of surgery, the voice that had stopped a panicked OR nurse from dropping a heart. It was a voice of absolute, terrifying command. The crowd of standing passengers didn't just move. They retracted, a wave pulling back, people stumbling into their seats as if pushed. Imani didn't run. She moved with a fast, gliding, economical pace, dropping her backpack as she went. She fell to her knees beside the man, her sneakers sliding on the carpet. The young flight attendant, the same one who had looked so terrified of Caroline Dupont, was there, her hands fluttering uselessly over the man's chest. "I'm Dr. Hayes," Imani said, her hands already at work. "What's his name?" I don't know," the attendant stammered, her eyes wide with terror. "It doesn't matter." Imani's fingers, the same fingers that could pilot a robot to perform microscopic sutures, pressed deep into the man's carotid artery. She felt nothing, not a flutter, not a thready pulse, just stillness. She pulled back his eyelid. The pupil was fixed, dilated. "He's in arrest, no pulse, no breathing." She looked up at the flight attendant. "What's your name?" "Jessica." "Jessica, I need you to be my nurse. You." She pointed to David, the junior attendant, who had just rushed up from the galley. "You're my second. Sarah," she yelled toward the front, knowing the purser was on her way. "I need the AID and the E-kit. Now!" "Jessica," she said, her voice dropping back to a cold, calm command center. "I need you to get on his chest. Interlock your hands. Center. Straight arms. I want 100 compressions a minute. Hard and fast. Go, go." Jessica, galvanized by the command, started. 1 and 2 and 3. "David," Imani said, ripping open the man's shirt, the sound of buttons popping lost in the cabin noise. "Go to the woman I hear crying. That's his wife. Get a history. Any history. Allergies, conditions, medications. What happened right before this? Go." David, his face pale but now filled with purpose, nodded and scrambled to the sobbing woman in seat 22B. "Harder, Jessica," Imani coached. "You are not going to break him. You need to break his ribs or you're not doing it right. Come on. 1 and 2 and 3. Sarah, the purser, arrived, her face a mask of professional calm. She didn't sprint. She was too good for that. She arrived, holding the red AED box and the larger emergency medical kit. "Here, doctor." "Thank you, Sarah." Imani ripped the AED open, pulled out the pads. "Jessica, stop compressions." She placed the pads with practiced, swift movements. 1 on the upper right, 1 on the lower left. The machine, the only calm voice in the cabin, whirred to life. "Analyzing rhythm. Do not touch patient." The cabin went deathly silent. The only sound was the engine's drone and the wife's muffled, gut-wrenching sobs. Imani watched the man's face. He was gone. He was a piece of meat on the floor, and she had seconds to pull him back. "Shock advised. Charging. Clear!" Imani yelled, her hands hovering over the man's chest, ensuring Jessica wasn't touching him. "Press the orange button. Shock delivered." The man's body arched off the floor in a single, violent, skeletal spasm. It was a grotesque, puppet-like movement. He slammed back down onto the carpet. "He's still in V-fib," Imani said, her eyes on the monitor. "Jessica, back on his chest. Now, don't you stop until I tell you." As Jessica resumed the frantic, life-saving rhythm, David rushed back, his face ashen. Doctor, I have the history." "Give it to me, David," Imani said, her focus on the man, her hands already tearing open the main medical kit, searching for an IV line. "His wife? She said his name is Gerald." Imani's hands froze for 1/10 of a second over a packet of sterile needles. Gerald, it's a common name. She said, "He has a very bad heart condition," David said, reading from his notepad, his voice trembling. He was nervous about the flight. He was flying to Zurich for a special operation, a heart valve, something. Imani's head snapped up. She locked eyes with David. The blood drained from her own face. "What's his last name, David?" she whispered. "Harrison," David said. "Gerald Harrison." The world tilted. The drone of the engine seemed to fade into a high-pitched whine. This was not a stranger. This was not a random passenger. This was him. This was her patient. This was the man she was flying 6,000 miles to save. The man whose complex 4D rendered heart she had memorized. The man whose calcium-choked aortic valve was her entire focus. He wasn't in first class. He was here, in 22B, with his wife. And he was dying. He was dying in the aisle, at her feet, before she could even get to the operating table. The cosmic, horrific, impossible irony of it struck her like a physical blow. The universe was not just indifferent, it was a comedian, and this was its most brutal, macabre punchline. A fire, cold and white-hot, lit inside her. It extinguished her shock. It extinguished her fatigue. It extinguished everything but the mission. No, not here. Not on my plane. Not on my watch. Not like this. You don't get to die on me, Gerald. Not now. She was no longer a doctor on a plane. She was a surgeon in her OR. "Sarah!" she barked. "Get me the phone to the cockpit. I want to talk to the captain, and I want a patch to Medlink. Now! Jessica, don't stop. David, hold his head. Keep the airway clear." Imani grabbed the IV kit. This is going to be hell. She needed to push epinephrine, but starting a line on a man with no pulse in a rocking airplane cabin was a near impossible task. His veins had collapsed. "Give me light," she ordered David, who fumbled for his service flashlight. She tied a tourniquet on Gerald's arm, slapping the pale flesh, searching for anything. A track, a shadow, anything. She found a faint blue line in his forearm. She didn't hesitate. A single, perfect insertion. She saw the flash of dark, deoxygenated blood. "I'm in." Sarah was at her side, holding the crew phone to her ear. "This is Dr. Imani Hayes," Imani said, her voice a steel blade, as she simultaneously hooked a bag of saline to the IV. "I am a double-board certified cardiovascular surgeon. I have a 72-year-old male, Gerald Harrison, who is my surgical patient, in V-fib arrest. I'm on board in the aisle. He has a known severe aortic stenosis. I've administered one shock. We are in active CPR. I'm pushing one of epi now." She injected the drug into the IV port. The captain's voice was instantly in her ear. "Doctor, this is Captain Hauser. What do you need?" "You're diverting," Imani said. "This is not a request. I need the closest major airport with a level 1 trauma center and a full cardiac team. I need them on the jet bridge when we land. We are 10 minutes out, Max, or we lose him." "We're over the Great Lakes, Doctor." The captain's voice was solid. "Closest is O'Hare. I can have us on the ground in 20 minutes. We're already descending." 20 minutes, Imani repeated. An eternity. "Make it 15, Captain." "Godspeed, Doctor." The line clicked. "Okay," Imani said to her new, terrified team. 20 minutes. We are going to keep this man alive for 20 minutes. Jessica, you're tiring. David, swap out. Do not miss a beat." The two attendants switched, a clumsy but effective maneuver. For 20 agonizing minutes, the aisle of the 777 became a high-stakes, mobile intensive care unit. Imani was a conductor, directing her small orchestra. Compressions. Stop. AED. Analyze. Shock advised. Clear. Shock. Back on the chest. Harder. Pushing another of epi. His wife, David. Is she okay? Get her a blanket. Tell her he is not alone." The plane was descending rapidly, the angle steep, the engines screaming. Paramedics would be waiting, but Imani knew, with a surgeon's grim certainty, that it was a losing battle. The brain was starving. "Come on, Gerald," she whispered, her own hands now taking over compressions, her hoodie long since discarded, sweat dripping from her forehead onto the man's chest. "Stay with me. You and I have a date in Zurich. Don't you dare stand me up." The plane slammed onto the runway at O'Hare with a force that rattled the cabin and knocked over the galley carts. It wasn't a landing. It was a controlled crash. The plane didn't even slow, taxiing at high speed, racing the clock. "He's back!" Jessica suddenly screamed. Imani's fingers flew to Gerald's neck, and there it was, a beat, a weak, thready, butterfly wing of a pulse. Thump, thump, thump. His chest hitched, a shallow, ragged, independent gasp. "I've got Rosk," Imani breathed, her voice raw. "He has a rhythm. He's breathing." The plane screeched to a halt at the gate. The seatbelt sign was still on, but the thump-thump of running feet was already pounding down the jet bridge. The door was ripped open. 3 Chicago paramedics burst in, their faces grim, carrying their gear. "In the back!" Sarah yelled. They thundered down the aisle, stopping at the scene. They saw a young, sweat-soaked black woman in a t-shirt on her knees, her hands on the patient. "Ma'am, we'll take it from here," the lead paramedic said, about to push her aside. Imani looked up. Her eyes were hard. "He's a 72-year-old male, known severe aortic stenosis, in V-fib arrest, witnessed collapse. I'm his surgeon. We've been in CPR for 22 minutes. Shocked twice, IV established, pushed 2 of EPI. We achieved Rosk 60 seconds ago. His rhythm is unstable, but he's breathing. He's Gerald Harrison." The paramedic's entire demeanor changed. He had been expecting a hysterical passenger. He had found the OR director. He knew that name. "Understood, Doctor," he said, his voice all business. "Let's move." As they masterfully and quickly loaded Gerald onto their gurney, his wife, Elizabeth, scrambled out of her seat. She was a ghost, her face streaked with tears. She didn't look at her husband. She grabbed Imani's arm. "You," she wept, her voice a raw whisper. Who are you? Are you an angel?" Imani stood up, her entire body aching, her knees screaming. She looked at the terrified woman. "I'm his doctor," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "I'm Dr. Hayes. He's stable. They'll take care of him. He's in good hands." "Dr. Hayes?" Elizabeth's eyes widened. The one from Los Angeles? The one he... Oh my God. The realization that the miracle was also the plan was too much. She just sobbed, clutching Imani's hand. The paramedics rushed Gerald off the plane. The cabin was left in a stunned, pin-drop silence. And then, one person in seat 24F began to clap, then another, and within seconds the entire economy cabin was on its feet, a thunderous, rolling ovation that echoed through the fuselage. People were crying. They were cheering. Imani just nodded, retrieved her hoodie, and slung it over her shoulder. She was covered in sweat. Her hair was a mess, and she was shaking from adrenaline. She was a hero. She walked, in a daze, back up the aisle, back through the curtain, back into the silent, privileged world of first class. All passengers were being told to deplane. As she passed 1C and 1D, she saw Carolyn and Arthur DuPont gathering their designer bags, their faces masks of pure, petulant fury. "This is an absolute disgrace," Caroline muttered to her husband, her voice a harsh, privileged hiss. "All this fuss. He probably just had indigestion. Now we'll be hours late. This is ruining our entire trip." Imani stopped her. She looked at Caroline. She had just walked from a war zone, from the very nexus of life and death. And here was this woman, complaining about a delay. Imani didn't say a word. She couldn't. There were no words. The chasm between their two worlds was too vast, too impossibly deep. She just stared at Carolyn for one long, cold second, her eyes, filled with the new, raw knowledge of what had just happened, burning into the other woman. Then she shook her head, turned, and walked off the plane, leaving Carolyn to stew in her own irrelevance. The descent into Zurich was not a gentle glide. It was a resurrection. 6 hours after their unscheduled landing in Chicago, the passengers of Swissair 041 were a different group of people. The cabin, once filled with the anonymous murmur of 300 separate lives, now felt like a single, massive organism, bound by a shared, traumatic event. They had, in a very real sense, watched a man die and be brought back to life, and they all knew who had done it. Imani Hayes, her hoodie now back on, her face pale with an exhaustion that went bone deep, was no longer an anonymous passenger in 1A. She was a folk hero. As the plane broke through the low-hanging clouds, revealing the breathtaking sun-drenched panorama of the Swiss Alps, a quiet, palpable reverence had settled over the first-class cabin. The flight crew, led by Sarah, treated her with a deference that bordered on awe. They didn't just offer her water, they presented it on a silver tray, as if offering a gift to an oracle. "Dr. Hayes," Sarah had knelt by her seat, her voice thick with emotion, her professional mask completely gone. "I've been flying for 20 years. I've seen a lot. I've never seen anything like that. What you did, the command you took, you were. Thank you. You didn't just save him. You saved all of us." Imani had just nodded, too tired to form the words. "You all did your job. You did it perfectly." "No," Sarah said, shaking her head. "We did our training. You performed a miracle." Across the aisle, Mark Jennings was already on his satellite-enabled Wi-Fi, his laptop open. He wasn't just checking email, he was on a mission. As the fasten seatbelt sign chimed for their final approach, he leaned over. "Dr. Hayes." "Imani," he said, his voice low and serious. "I've spent the last hour reading every paper you've ever published. The Hayes-Tully mod. It's not just groundbreaking, it's revolutionary. I've also been on the phone with my foundation's director." Imani turned, surprised. "On the plane?" Mark tapped his high-tech satellite phone. "The perks of being the boss. Listen, I meant what I said. My company's foundation funds a major fellowship at Johns Hopkins, but it's conventional. We're funding legacy work. What you are doing is the future. I've already spoken to my board. We want to fund you. Not a project, you. Whatever you need, a new lab, a full team, your name on the building, you just tell me the number, and we'll make it happen." Imani was, for the first time in 24 hours, speechless. This wasn't just a business card. This was a blank check. This was the kind of freedom that researchers dreamed of. The freedom to work without the endless, grinding hunt for grants. "Mark, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything yet," he smiled. "Just take my card. And when you're back in the States, let's change the world." He handed her a heavy, black metal card. Imani took it, the weight of it feeling symbolic. And then there was Caroline. She was in 1C, a simmering volcano of curdled rage. She had spent the last 6 hours in a self-imposed, bitter exile. She had snapped her blinds shut, refusing to look at the Alps. She had refused her meal, pushing it away as if it were poison. She had watched, with eyes narrowed to slits, the reverence shown to Imani. She had seen the fawning of the flight attendants. She had seen the billionaire tech CEO lean in, his voice full of deference. To her, the world had been turned upside down. The natural order had been violated. A woman in a hoodie was being treated like a queen, while she, Caroline DuPont, was being ignored. She was the real victim here. Her trip was ruined. The delay was an outrage. The emergency, which she had convinced herself was a dramatic overreaction, probably just a man fainting, had cost her a full day. And that doctor, that woman, was at the center of it. She was savoring the attention. Caroline was sure of it. Her husband, Arthur, had tried to speak to her. Caroline, perhaps you should apologize. The woman is a doctor. She did save that man's life. Caroline had turned to him, her voice a venomous whisper. Apologize? For what? For being right? She was rude, she's arrogant, and she's reveling in this. She probably poisoned him just to get the attention. Now leave me alone, Arthur. You are weak. Arthur had shrunk back, silenced, and retreated into his own world of shame. The plane touched down with a gentle bump. As it taxied to the gate, the captain's voice came over the PA. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Zurich. We apologize again for our significant delay, caused by a medical diversion in Chicago. On that note, I'd like to publicly, and on behalf of our entire crew, extend our deepest gratitude to Dr. Imani Hayes. Her heroic, life-saving actions on board are the reason a fellow passenger is alive today. We ask that you join us in a round of applause. The plane, the entire plane, from first to economy, erupted. It was a wave of sound, a thunderous, heartfelt ovation. Imani's face flushed. She just wanted to sleep. She gave a small, awkward wave. Caroline sat in 1C, her arms crossed, her face stone, her hands resolutely still. She did not clap. The jet bridge was a tunnel of decompression. As the first-class cabin disembarked, a new hierarchy was in place. Dr. Hayes, please, after you, Sarah said, holding the other passengers back. Imani walked out first, alone. The other passengers from 1A and 1B, including Mark, hung back, giving her space. As she walked, passengers from business class, who had also been told the story, nodded at her. Well done, Doctor. God bless you. She was a celebrity, clad in joggers and a hoodie. Behind her, Caroline and Arthur were the last to disembark. As Caroline stepped out, a woman from business class, recognizing her from the confrontation, just looked her up and down and muttered, "Disgusting," before turning away. Caroline's face tightened, but she said nothing, her eyes fixed on the baggage claim sign. She just wanted her luggage. She would get her things, get to the Boar au Lac, have a gin and tonic, and put this entire vulgar episode behind her. They entered the main terminal. It was a cathedral of glass and steel, clean, quiet, and efficient. And standing right at the arrival gate, past the knot of drivers holding signs, was a man. He was not holding a sign. He didn't need to. He stood apart, his presence radiating an authority that was absolute. He was in an impeccably tailored dark grey suit, his hair silver at the temples, his face etched with exhaustion, but alert, like a high-strung predator. His eyes scanned every passenger coming off the jet bridge. He saw Imani. He didn't know her, but he was clearly looking for someone. Imani, expecting no one, just kept walking, her eyes searching for the exit. The man stepped forward, his eyes locking onto her. Dr. Hayes? Imani stopped, startled. Yes? The man's entire body sagged in relief. He crossed the distance, his hand extended. Philip Vandenberg. I'm Mr. Gerald Harrison's chief of staff. Dr. Hayes, I have been on the phone with the chief of surgery at Northwestern Memorial for the last 3 hours. He took her hand in both of his. His were cold. What you did. The report you gave the paramedics. The mid-air stabilization. I'm not a doctor, but the team in Chicago said. They said you didn't just save his life. You saved his brain. You saved him. They said it was a 1 in a billion chance that you were on that plane. I just did my job, Philip, Imani said, her voice weary. How is he? Truly. He's stable, Philip said, his voice cracking for a fraction of a second. "He's out of surgery. The team there. They took over from the groundwork you laid. His wife, Elizabeth, is with him. She asked me to. She couldn't form the words. Just, thank you. Endlessly. Thank you. That's all I need to hear," Imani said, a genuine, tired smile touching her lips. "I'm so glad he's okay. We have a car waiting. The presidential suite at the Boro Lac is yours for as long as you'd like. We'll handle your flight back. Anything. The Harrison Foundation is indebted to you, Doctor. For life." "Philip, really, I just want a shower and a bed." She laughed softly. "Of course. This way." He took her carry-on bag from her hand, a gesture of profound respect, and began to guide her toward the exit. And that's when they passed the baggage claim information screen. A small crowd of passengers from their flight was clustered around it, but one voice was rising above the rest, a high, piercing shriek that echoed off the terrazzo floors. "What do you mean it's not here?" Philip Vandenberg paused, his brow furrowing at the disturbance. Imani looked over. It was, of course, Caroline Dupont. She was jabbing her finger at a terrified young Swiss baggage agent. Arthur stood behind her, a ghost of a man, holding their empty luggage cart. "That is unacceptable!" Caroline was screaming. "4 pieces, Louis Vuitton, hard shell. My tag is pink. It's not on the carousel. I demand you find it." The agent was typing frantically. "Madam, I am so sorry. It appears, with the emergency diversion in Chicago, the bags were not what? Speak English. Not what? They are still in Chicago, madam." The silence that followed was more profound than the scream. Caroline's face, already red, went a stark, chalky white. "You are lying," she whispered, her voice trembling with a rage so pure it was almost impressive. "My gown is in that bag. My jewelry. The Zurich Benefactors' Ball is tonight. I am a guest of honor. Do you have any idea who I am? Do you know who my husband is?" Philip Vandenberg, who had been watching this with a look of detached distaste, suddenly froze. His head tilted. The name, the ball, the flight. A terrible, cold arithmetic was happening in his brain. He looked at Imani, a silent question in his eyes. Imani just gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Yes, that's her. Philip's entire demeanor shifted. The warm, grateful man was gone. The chief of staff, the man who ran a multi-billion-dollar empire, the shark, had just surfaced. He let go of Imani's bag and walked, his footsteps silent and deliberate, toward the scene. "Mrs. Dupont?" he asked, his voice like silk-wrapped ice. Caroline spun around, ready to unleash her fury on a new target. She saw his suit, his watch, his aura of power. She instantly recalibrated. This was not an employee. This was someone. "Yes," she gushed, her entire face transforming into a mask of tragic, aristocratic victimhood. "Oh, thank goodness! Someone with authority. These fools have lost all of our luggage. It's an absolute disaster. I'm Caroline Dupont, and this is my husband, Arthur." She gestured to Arthur, who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. "We are here for the Benefactors' Ball tonight," Caroline continued. "We're guests of Gerald Harrison. Arthur, here, is on the short list for the new board nomination, you know. It's critical we have our things. This delay on the flight was bad enough. But this..." Philip Vandenberg stood for a long second, his face a perfect, unreadable mask. "I am Philip Vandenberg," he said, his voice so quiet that Caroline had to lean in. "I am Mr. Harrison's chief of staff, and I am the chairman of the Benefactors' Ball." Caroline's face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Philip, oh, what a relief. Thank goodness you're here. You must understand. You have to make them find my bags. This is ruining everything." "Yes," Philip said, his eyes as cold and dead as a winter lake. I do understand. You were on flight 141. Yes, a total nightmare. We were delayed for hours in Chicago. Some fuss in the back of the plane. He probably just had indigestion. An absolute disgrace. Philip nodded, as if accepting a final piece of evidence. The awful fuss, he said, his voice still terrifyingly soft, was my employer, Gerald Harrison, dying of a massive heart attack in the aisle. The delay you found so inconvenient was the pilot diverting the plane to save his life. The color, which had just returned to Caroline's face, vanished. What? Gerald? Oh, how awful. I didn't know. You didn't, Philip agreed. But you know what you did know, Mrs. Dupont. You knew her, he pointed. Not with his finger, just a turn of his head. He indicated Imani, who was standing 10 feet away, watching this all unfold. That woman, Philip continued, in the hoodie, the one you are on record. And yes, the purser did file a report as having harassed. The one you tried to have removed from her seat. The one you accused of not belonging in first class. Caroline's mouth opened and closed, a fish on a hook. That woman is Dr. Imani Hayes. She is the surgeon, the only surgeon on the planet, in fact, who was flying to Zurich to save Mr. Harrison's life. And when he went into full cardiac arrest at 30,000 feet, she, and she alone, brought him back from the dead. In the aisle, while you were complaining about the fuss. Philip took a small, neat step closer. Caroline instinctively flinched. Mrs. Harrison, Gerald's wife, was with him in economy. She called me, hysterical, from the Chicago hospital. She told me everything. She told me how, as the paramedics were taking her husband away, a vile, entitled woman in first class complained, loud enough for her to hear, that her trip was being ruined. He let that hang in the air. The baggage agent was watching, wide-eyed. Even Arthur had shrunk, his hand over his mouth. So let me be clear, Mrs. Dupont, Philip said, his voice a final, surgical cut. You will not be attending the benefactor's ball. Not tonight. Not ever. Your husband's board nomination? I am withdrawing it as of this second. And by the time I am finished with my calls this afternoon, your name will be so toxic in this city and in New York that the only invitation you will ever receive is one to the dog park. You can't, Caroline whispered. It was a plea. I can, Philip stated. The Harrison Foundation is the Zurich social scene, and we have a very strict policy about people who harass our heroes. He adjusted his cuff. The execution was over. Good day, Mrs. Dupont. Mr. Dupont. I do hope your luggage finds you, eventually. He turned his back on her, the ultimate, final insult. He walked back to Imani, his face softening, the warmth returning as if a switch had been flipped. Dr. Hayes, he said, picking up her bag. I am so sorry you had to witness that. Your car is this way. Let's get you to your suite. Imani looked at Caroline Dupont one last time. The woman was still frozen, her hands clutched to her pearls, her face a mask of shattered, uncomprehending horror. Arthur was now gently, pathetically, patting her on the back as she began to make a small, choking, whimpering sound. She was left with nothing. No luggage, no ball, no status, no board seat. She was just a woman, alone in a foreign airport, with no one to blame but the reflection she had despised in 1A. Imani turned away. She didn't feel vengeful. She didn't feel angry. She just felt a sense of balance. The universe had recalibrated. As she and Philip walked through the large glass doors into the fresh, clean Swiss air, Imani looked up at the mountains. She was exhausted. She was aching, and she still had a dozen reports to file. But for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she allowed herself a small, slow, deeply satisfied smile. The weight was still there, but for a moment, karma had helped her carry it. And that's what we call gate-checked karma. Caroline Dupont didn't just lose her luggage, she lost her status, her reputation, and her future, all because she couldn't see past a person's hoodie to the brilliance underneath. Dr. Imani Hayes, on the other hand, walked away with a new research grant, the respect of her peers, and the knowledge that she saved a life, all before her hotel check-in. This story is a powerful reminder that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear hoodies. And true class has nothing to do with your ticket. It has everything to do with how you treat people. If you loved this story of justice and karma, please hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. And share this video with someone who needs to see that kindness is free, but a lack of it can cost you everything.